Thank you, Professor Yoshimura. I'd like to thank Tokyo University for hosting this event. The partnership between the United States and Japan goes back a long way. Relationships have grown up between our countries, between our governments, between our peoples, have been extraordinarily important. They continue to be so. I've been around long enough to have had the privilege to have met a number of U.S. ambassadors along the way. And when you think of really great Americans like Mike Mansfield and Tom Foley and Howard Baker, and I see former Undersecretary John Tuck, who served here with Ambassador Baker, and we have had recently John Roos, who did such extraordinary work during the whole Fukushima episode, and now Ambassador Caroline Kennedy. It's no coincidence America sends some of our outstanding lights, some of the truly great, distinguished Americans, because we recognize the importance of this bilateral relationship, and it's something that I'm sure will continue to be vitally important to both of our nations. We're treaty allies. We're joined by strong shared security interests. I know this from my personal experience. I've spent easily hundreds of hours over the years dealing with national security issues with my Japanese counterparts and such areas as addressing the critical nonproliferation challenge posed to the regime back in the 1990s by North Korea, and many, many others besides. Now, to be sure, any two great nations have different perspectives, and we have not always agreed on every single element of every single policy, but I can assure you that we have come to these issues with a shared sense of purpose and common strategic objectives, and that I think we have both benefited from those very fruitful exchanges that we've had over the years. And I think it's been to the net benefit of both of our national security and of regional security and indeed of global security. As two of the world's largest economies and as charter members of the G7, our economic cooperation has also been extraordinarily important. We share ties of democracy, of ties of commerce, ties of family, ties of affection, ties of friendship. And these ties are deeply informed by and contribute to a set of shared values. I would say that this is true in the energy sector, and certainly true when it comes to nuclear energy, where we have many, many years of cooperation between our governments, between our scientists and engineers, and between our companies. This cooperation has reflected long-standing U.S.-Japanese mutual efforts to combat the threat of nuclear weapons proliferation and nuclear terrorism, and it has allowed our two governments to handle very sensitive bilateral issues. That said, for nuclear power to succeed in Japan or in the United States or anywhere, we need to build, support, and sustain public confidence. That will only happen if you have a credible, real, and rigorous safety system. That means continued self-reflection. There is no room for complacency, for what we call in the United States a check-the-box mentality, a mentality that substitutes static, uncritical models or rote procedures for a probabilistic risk management approach to nuclear safety or for any other kind of industrial safety. So for nuclear power to succeed, we have to have a smart and an effective approach on environmental management, on safety, and on nonproliferation. And we have to have a business case that closes. That is to say, there's got to be a commercial rationale that can be supported by our nuclear efforts. That's why our two governments agreed in April 2012 to set up this high-level bilateral commission. It was very much a response to Fukushima. It reflected the understanding that even though we had many years of bilateral nuclear cooperation between us, that we needed to elevate the level of engagement to very senior levels of government to make sure it had that very focused attention at the highest levels, and in addition that we needed to expand the subject matter of our dialogue from our traditional two areas of cooperation on civil nuclear energy cooperation and nuclear nonproliferation to a whole new set of issues. Number one, nuclear safety. Number two, environmental management. Number three, emergency response. I am pleased to report that we have just concluded today, after a very, very long set of discussions, a very successful third round of this bilateral commission. The first one was hosted here by then Vice Minister Beisho in July 2012. We hosted one in Washington last November, and then Vice Minister Sugiyama hosted here this morning and had all of his colleagues from other ministries, Ministry of Environment, METI, MEXT, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, and other entities besides, all participating. And on our side, we brought the Environmental Protection Agency, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Department of State, the Department of Commerce. So both sides were very, very well represented and pursuing the same set of objectives of the safe production of carbon-free electricity through nuclear energy, and recognizing that that overall purpose of minimizing the risk of catastrophic climate change would be enhanced to the extent that we are able to support the successful reestablishment of a civil nuclear program here in Japan. That having been said, we have never asserted, and we don't believe, that nuclear energy is the beginning and end of a clean energy strategy. It is an element of an overall clean energy portfolio. So when President Obama went out in the Rose Garden a few days after the tragic events of March 11th, 2011, he made very clear that the United States would take fully into account all the lessons that could be learned from the Fukushima episode, but that having been said, we still view, and the United States still pursues, nuclear energy as an important element of a low-carbon strategy. That's why we're building 5 new reactors now. That's why we've supported new reactors with loan guarantees. And that's why we're looking at small modular reactors as a possibility for countries that may not have the same size grid, may not have the same access to large amounts of capital that are needed to build the conventional large light water reactors that we are all familiar with. So we need a diverse approach to energy, both from the economic standpoint and from an energy security standpoint. We promote energy security through diversity of sources of supply, both geographically and technologically. President Obama made this point very clearly when he visited The Hague earlier this year and said that, and I'm quoting here, "There's no perfect, free, ideal, cheap energy sources. Every possible energy source has some inconveniences or downsides. So our job is to mitigate those inconveniences and downsides and to gain the benefits of the energy resources in the most efficient manner possible." And while we all of us know here that Japan has not been particularly blessed with abundant hydrocarbon resources, important work is going on here to promote the development of renewable resources, from solar and wind to geothermal and biomass to ocean kinetic and thermal power. And of course, lowering energy demand through improved efficiency is the cheapest path of all to energy security. So last week, President Obama announced his Clean Power Plan with new standards for existing power plants in the United States, standards that will cut carbon emissions from the power sector by 30% from 2005 levels by 2030, along with cutting particle pollution, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur dioxide by more than 25%. We expect that meeting these standards will have important health effects within the United States, avoiding 150,000 asthma attacks in children each year and avoiding up to 6,500 premature deaths. We also expect that these technologies that we use to meet these new standards will gain international interest and will help fossil fuels remain competitive in world energy markets as they move toward low-carbon energy solutions. We have already invested, I should note, more than $6 billion in carbon capture and sequestration technologies under the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, and that's why we're making available $8 billion in loan guarantee authority to support fossil fuel technologies. We also hope that some of these loan guarantees will go to support natural gas projects. Let me be clear. Increased LNG use will be very important to our future, and increased use of natural gas in the United States already has gotten us about halfway to our objective of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 17% by the year 2020 compared to a base in 2005. The story, by the way, of natural gas in the United States is a very good example of how government research and development can play a very important role in bringing new energy technologies to market. So from 1978 to 1992, an era in which there was no discernible interest in the business community in the exotic technologies that were then thought of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, the U.S. Department of Energy invested about $137 million in those technologies. Not a big number by standards of long-standing Washington programs for development of various energy resources. But that modest investment led ultimately to this incredible transformation of our gas infrastructure. And to be sure that there was other support that was very important from the U.S. Congress in the form of certain tax treatments, and there was obviously a lot of hard work done by entrepreneurial people out in industry, much of which has been written about, but that initial seed capital from the Department of Energy was very important, and as a result, the United States has now become the leading gas producer in the world, and our own natural gas content has increased from 2%, only 2% from shale gas sources, to 40% since the year 2000. So this is something that has had a tremendous economic benefit to the United States. Oil and gas production alone have added 0.2 percentage points to our real GDP growth in both 2012 and 2013, which is about 10% of our overall growth rate. And while our growth has continued in terms of economic GDP, as I said, we have actually reduced our carbon levels since 2005. So I think it's important to realize that these benefits cannot be taken for granted. Just as with nuclear energy, so too in the area of natural gas development, we have to take public confidence very much in mind, and the concerns that have been raised by many about the safety of fracking activities, about the chemical composition of fracking fluids, about the threat of fugitive methane emissions. All of these issues are very serious ones that we need good science, good data, and good governance if we are to be able to continue to enjoy the benefits of this prodigious outpouring of natural gas, which has had so many benefits so far to our national economy. And finally, as the President has often said, natural gas is a bridge fuel. We have about 100 years worth of gas, he has said, but the idea is it is a bridge to an even lower carbon future, because even though natural gas produces just half of the greenhouse gas emissions compared to coal when it comes to power generation, obviously nuclear produces zero, wind produces zero, solar produces zero, and so we need to take advantage of the time that's given to us by having this economic benefit to make those smart investments that are going to drive even cleaner technologies into the forefront of our energy marketplace. So while I know that this is a room full of many engineers, I want to note that deploying renewable technology is not solely an engineering problem. It's going to take trillions of dollars of capital, and the capability and, frankly, the imagination to devote to deploy that capital and to deploy it wisely is going to be a really big and important challenge. In the United States, we've made, I think, important progress in meeting this challenge through the use of our loan guarantee program. The Department of Energy Loan Program Office has used loan guarantees to support very important facilities. In 2009, we had exactly 0 solar photovoltaic plants of grid scale in the United States of America. Through our loan guarantee program, we supported the first 5 to get built. After the market saw that that was a successful program and that those plants were able to attract power purchasing agreements that produced a very predictable cash flow for 20, 25 years, the private sector came in and financed the next 10 solar photovoltaic plants. That's the kind of demonstration effect that we're talking about. The government is never going to have a number of resources required to make the investments of a scale in the trillions of dollars required to transform our energy economy, but we can at the margin make important pivotal investments that demonstrate proof of concept and help attract private capital from the sidelines. And look, I think it's important to note here that this is part of a much larger transformation in our energy economy. We have faced not only the threat of, but frankly, the reality of climate change. I invite any or all of you to take a look at the 3rd National Climate Assessment that came out a few weeks ago from the White House. And the effects of devastating climate change are already here. Whether you look at devastating droughts in the southwest of the United States or in southern Australia, obviously Japan has suffered devastating tsunamis. The United States has suffered Hurricane Sandy and many other devastating hurricanes besides. So we need to be smart about not only mitigating against climate change, but in adapting to that climate change that is already with us. And that's why on that sweltering day, even hotter than it is in this auditorium, last year in Georgetown, when President Obama stepped out and announced to the world a climate action plan, he based it on 3 pillars, and you've just heard about 2 of them. The first is to mitigate against climate change that has not occurred. That means more carbon-free energy, whether from geothermal or hydro or biomass or nuclear or wind or solar, or improved efficiency, fuel efficiency in our transportation fleets, building efficiency in our homes, in apartment buildings, in factories. It means the second pillar of the Climate Action Plan, mitigation not being enough. We need to adapt to and be resilient against the climate change that's already with us. That means smarter grids. That means more resilient grids. That means distributed generation, combined heat and power, and a deeper understanding of the intersection between different energy sectors and the liquid sector and the electric sector and the role of energy storage in all of them. And the third pillar of the Climate Action Plan is international cooperation, because it's not good enough to be good enough in one country. There aren't walls, as everyone here knows, that are going to stop climate change from traversing national boundaries. And we could have many or most countries cut their carbon emissions to 0, and if certain countries don't follow suit, it will not avail us, because we'll all suffer the same climatic effects. And as you hear me talk about the 3 pillars of the Climate Action Plan, mitigation, adaptation, and international cooperation, you can see where I'm going with this, which is the United States-Japan cooperation is essential in all 3 pillars. So our mission is vital and urgent. The threats that we have overwhelming scientific evidence are human-driven, are here. It is, as the President has repeatedly made clear, our moral responsibility to tackle those threats. And why I like to come to places like Tokyo University is I'm looking around and I don't know who among you and how many of you are going to be the people who bring us the change, the people who bring us the technology, the people who think of the new instruments, the people who come up with the new solutions that are going to save our planet. But you're here. somewhere. And the power of individuals to make a profound difference is just as present today as it has been ever before. And it's inspiring to see people like you dedicating your lives to finding the engineering solutions and other solutions to the challenges that really define our generation and your generation and generations yet to come. I couldn't be happier to be anywhere than I am to be with you here today. I want to thank everybody here, not only for coming out to spend some time talking with me, and I'm going to turn to your questions in a second, but more importantly, for what you're doing with your lives. And I'd like to thank your professors for helping you really tackle some of the challenges that will make or break society. We're depending on you. Your families are depending on you. Your children, those of you who have them yet, are depending on you. And when they have children, they'll be depending on you too. So with that, I want to say to everyone here, a most sincere thank you for your attention. Good luck in all of your studies and all that follows your studies. And let's do everything we can, because it's a moral obligation, I think, for all of us, of all generations, to do what we can to preserve this cherished planet of ours. You know, there's an old saying that the world is not so much bequeathed to our children as borrowed from them. So let's be careful with it. Let's do what we can to leave our children the kind of world we would like to see. And if we do that, then however else our efforts flourish or fail, the effort will certainly be worth it and will bring pride to you, to your families, and to all that are yet to come. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.